Factions of Calliope. Equally far from the grand bastion of Union and the shining frontier of the Dawnline shore. But the political situation in Calliope is no less complex for its isolation. If anything, it's more so. The designs of entities like Union and Harrison Armory often play out over generations, their implications passing unnoticed to the man on the street. In Calliope, the state of the system's politics and your position within them might well dictate whether you get to eat tonight, or whether you still have a home tomorrow. Each faction has a broadly defined core mission, its overarching ambitions and goals. Not all members will agree on the method by which these goals should be achieved, nor will all members will even agree on the goals. It's perfectly possible to find members pledging loyalty to a faction while pursuing their own agendas. Hell's Gate. Part labor union, part mining syndicate, part techno-socialist committee, part mutual aid group, Hell's Gate works as hard as it can to meet the needs of the Gate's people. These needs are considerable as the second largest population of the Big Four, but is by far the poorest. While the station's promise to never charge its citizens for the basic essentials of life is noble, its revenue streams are low. The station's beloved director, Ezekiel, vanished about 3 years ago, leaving the station's previous militia commander, Jerry Masters, as acting director. Jerry is a kind and well-meaning man who genuinely wants the best for the station and its inhabitants. But he's neurotic, anxious, and somewhat unprepared for the burden of station management. He gets little sleep, is constantly overworked, and has few support staff other than his devoted ASURA class NHP Shelley. A few people accuse Jerry of refusing to hold a by-election out of a lust for power. But the truth is, there's no one else running for the position. Nothing would please Jerry more than to quit his job. But it really seems like if he won't do it, nobody will. Jerry feels, and is likely correct, that he would be even less legitimate elected by default than semi-permanently occupying an unelected caretaker role. Hell's Gate is torn between the needs of its civilian residents, particularly its powerful mining and refining unions, and the needs of its defensive militia. Militia spending occupies a great deal of the station's limited budget, for little immediate gain. The more anarchist voices on the station question the need for something only a couple of steps away from a police force. Under Director Bai, such critics held their tongues under Jerry. People are starting to grumble openly. Hell's Gate United really is in a tough spot. Also, the seas work for them. Good luck, Board of Icebreaker. A long time ago, the CPS Borealis had a job. Now it just has a hustle. No longer able to break ice and sell water, it's been turned into a glittering vice district. A paradise for the weary traveler, and a place where fortunes can be made or lost. Overseeing it is the Board of Icebreaker, a council of executives, casino owners and profiteers, and the occasional union rep who was too popular or influential to shut out. Despite the public image of competence and stability it tries to project, the board is a mess. Every member suspects every other member of trying to pull a scam. After all, it's what most of them are doing themselves. Anything one member suggests, others oppose on general principle. Important decisions sit paralyzed by squabbling for weeks, months, or even years. The station's administrator, Rita, is a cool, calculating woman who stays in her position through a combination of compromise and cunning. Although she's supposed to be answerable to the station's entire populace, she is reliant on the board to actually get anything done. This gives Rita both a great degree of operational leeway and almost none. The board genuinely don't care about the decisions she makes, unless they might somehow interfere with profits. Most positive changes on the Icebreaker are a result of Rita manipulating members of the board into seeing something she wants as a scam, but one she's letting them in on. This is how the Icebreaker has an all-access radio station, free mass transit, and a variety of affordable public services. Rita tricked the board into funding them, thinking it was some sort of racket they could use to get a leg up on the competition. The board has a large mutual security force to protect the station, its guests, and its permanent residents. But most of the richer members retain their own private forces, just in case. The board will probably serve as allies to the CEs, but unreliable ones. Yes, saving Calliope is a mutual interest, but how can it be monetized? Impact Dynamics, LLC. Originally a weapons manufacturer during Calliope's initial land rush, Impact Dynamics engaged in a risky but ultimately successful pivot towards agriculture when it turned out there were no habitable planets in Calliope. Operating out of Impact Plaza, Impact Dynamics now produces nearly 80% of the system's food and about 2/3 of its medicine. Hell's Gate and Furnace City produce most of their own essentials, but the Icebreaker Borealis has far more guests and far richer tastes than it can provide for on its own. Meanwhile, almost all the smaller settlements across the system are dependent on Impact Dynamics. Never a compassionate operation, the company has been steadily raising prices in Calliope for more than a century, causing increasing poverty and instability throughout the system's various habitats. It invested its profits into a large and brutal security force to prevent the rest of Calliope from getting any ideas about equal distribution of resources. However, 12 years ago, they finally went too far. Labor action forced them to call in pirates to suppress striking workers. The slaughter that followed caused Endymion's Lament, the system's largest fuel supplier, to cut them off. Without the fuel to sustain their fleet of ships and mechs, their grip on the system waned. The following year, a controlling interest in Impact Dynamics was acquired by Roderick Steele. Presenting himself as an entrepreneur, philosopher, and self-described sexual tyrannosaurus, he is in truth a compensating anthrochauvinist with a long list of catastrophic business failures behind him. Under his leadership, Impact Dynamics has leaned even further into the hiring of pirate gangs to pursue its agenda. Impact Dynamics will be a constant thorn in the CS side throughout the campaign, funding their various enemies and gating access to basic necessities behind absurd prices. It is indirectly due to Steele's cutthroat exploitation that the faith of the One is so powerful, and that Calliope is in such a poor position to resist them. Furnace City Assembly. In the northern reaches of rain-drenched, barren Asphodel, there lies something unique in the Long Rim, a planetary city. Furnace City, sometimes known as the Only City, was established during the early years of Calliope in a dogged attempt to make something of a bad situation. The Furnace City Assembly is an anarcho-socialist hybrid democracy, consisting of a quorum of elected representatives for day-to-day administration, and plenary referendums of the entire citizenship for major decisions. It's the largest governmental organization in Calliope by membership, although its authority extends no further than the city limits. For a century and a half, no matter what else it's been doing, the Assembly has kept one goal constantly in mind: remain independent from Impact Dynamics. Given that Impact Plaza orbits the planet, this hasn't always been easy, but the Assembly has always fended off attempts on its sovereignty. The pirate bands. Not a singular faction, but a general class of Calliopean residents. Pirates are separated into two groups, irregulars and careerists, often called moonlighters and sunlighters respectively. Irregulars are people for whom piracy is a side gig. They live across the system. Most of the time, they're farmers, miners, wrenchies, or the cute guy running that little dumpling stand on the corner. They try to maintain complete separation between their public and private lives. It's not exactly going to help the popularity of your dumpling stall if people know the secret ingredient is shaking down water freighters. Irregulars don't mythologize their profession. They know that they're doing a bad thing and justify it through necessity. Calliope's a hard place. They have a thing that puts food on the table. They aren't proud of it, but at least they aren't hungry. They congregate in small groups, refer to each other via aliases, and try not to contact each other outside of business hours. Their bands don't have names or logos. They try to avoid making a name for themselves. In contrast, careerists have openly embraced a life of piracy. If they have other jobs or talents, those are the side gigs. Space lane robbery is their profession. Their identities are based around their work. They form reputations and legends for themselves. They organize into bands with names, iconography, and mythology. They compete to see who can earn the highest bounty, who can claim the biggest prize, who can build the fanciest steed. Being a known criminal quickly makes you unwelcome in Calliopean society, so they operate their own hangouts and lairs. These tend to be abandoned facilities from Calliope's early settlement period, repurposed ships seized in raids or holdups, or prefab habitation units. The four most prominent Sunlighter bands are the Hellhounds, a particularly violent band of exiles from Hell's Gate, led by Andros Capella. The Burning Forge, a labor union that went militant, led by the Blacksmith. The Knights of the Dark Core, an eccentric group of image-conscious robbers with pretensions of chivalry, led by Mistress Elske. The Circuit, a former horror cell-turned-survivalist cult, led by two cascading NHP god kings, Triple Point and Caustic. Union. A long rim posting is seen as a poison chalice in Union civil service. Somewhere your boss sends you when they have no way of denying you a promotion, but really want to get rid of you. To many of the system's residents, Union's presence in Calliope is a punchline in itself. Even though Calliope might be the long rim system to which CENTCOM has committed the most resources, most people wouldn't consider Union's opinion on Calliope relevant either, because they don't think it has one, or because even if it did, it has no way of enforcing it. This belief, cynical as it might be, isn't untrue. Union's responsibilities are immense, spanning thousands of worlds and trillions of people. Calliope's population isn't even 50 million, and a part of Space CENTCOM has been strongly advising people not to live for centuries. In Union's view, if people won't leave, there's only so much they can do to help page the Union Administrative Department, has not assigned an administrator to Calliope. The closest thing the system has is Kalina Morton, a civilian liaison from the Bureau of Orbital and Non-Terrestrial Management. Kalina is possibly the least appreciated person in Calliope relative to the sheer amount of work they've done for it. For all the cruel jokes made at their expense, Calliopeans would still be paying out the nose for Omni access if Kalina hadn't convinced Union to build the neutral Omni node. The neutral Omni node was also seen as a project of enough value to defend, hence the unprecedented deployment of a permanent Union Navy presence in a long rim system. Since 5011 U, this post has been occupied by the carrier UNSCV Thames, commanded by Captain Mercedes Ordaz. The next carrier in the rotation, the UNSCV Monongahela, is scheduled to arrive later this year. The faith of the One. The faith of the one plumed in golden flame arose from the same place many cults in the long rim do. Misery and desperation. It's difficult in the extreme to make comfortable and happy people invested in the concept of the apocalypse. For people scraping algae off of water condensers to feed their families and working 12 hours a day just to make enough money to pay the oxygen bill. However, the idea of burning the world away becomes much more palatable. Within the last 2 years, however, there has been a dramatic shift in the faith's behavior. Zealous before, its higher echelons have suddenly become vastly more fanatical. The faith's community hubs, physical and virtual, buzz with sudden activity, especially in Calliope. Under the leadership of Ignatius Arum, strange and wonderful things have been pouring from underground labs. Recruitment drives have been stepping up across the long rim.